Hi everybody, welcome back to God Academy. Hi Tamar. We have a very special video today. This is a video collaboration with an awesome channel, Civilization X. Basically, it's a video about timelines, about the timelines of Westeros, how they correlate with the timelines of Britain. And then there's a bold prediction later in the video. And once you see the video, be sure to check out Civilization X, the channel, and subscribe. Of course, that's an awesome channel with great art, specifically of timelines and prophecies, not only A Song of Ice and Fire, and he also seems like an awesome guy, so check him out. So let's start with the timelines. What do we know about timelines? What are basically historical timelines?
Historical timelines basically are a convenient way for historians and for people to make some sense out of the stories out of the story of the humans.
What do you mean?
The whole arrangement of the timeline it basically creates a narrative or a story. Timelines. So if you put like numbers and events and arrange them in some kind of order, it makes sense as a story.
So it means that you have to ignore like countless events that you don't put into the timelines in order to make the story make sense.
Every timeline is a choice, and of course because it's a personal choice usually,
ideological choice,
or ideologically is biased. The historian is biased.
So basically Westeros' timeline, which we'll get into in details shortly, we see it through the eyes of Westeros. And even the timeline of Essos, we see it through what's important to Westeros.
If we compare it to the timelines we know from today, like the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, it's basically a European timeline, not a Arabian timeline or a Chinese timeline.
So no Giscari timeline, no Slaver's Bay or
no foreigner people. Maybe they even start the story a little bit earlier or a little bit later, you know.
Okay, so let's break it down. We chose events we deemed were the most important in the story of Westeros, basically, and we start with the first man. Why do you think that's the way to start?
Start of the collective memory of the people in Westeros. Timelines are a way to arrange this collective memory and transform the history of the nation or the history of people, humankind, or history of the class, and connected to the personal history of the individual. Okay,
so let's go through the timeline, the Westerosi timeline that we chose, and compare it to the British timeline. So we said we started with the first man. How do you compare that to real British history?
The first men that came to Britain were the first men, the first Homo sapiens, about 30,000 years ago or so.
Then the Long Night. Then there's the Andal invasion, that changes the political situation and the demographic situation in Westeros.
They came with a different culture, with different religion, and it's very similar. I see it like as the Roman invasion of Britain, like in the first century.
What happened there?
The Roman Empire conquered like half of Britain, and with different gods, different culture.
The next important event is the Doom of Valyria, of course. First of all, it's interesting that when you look from the point of view of Westeros, at Valyria, you only look at the Doom. You don't look at the conquest. If you want to choose one specific event, the most important event is the fall of Valyria. But what do you compare it to in history?
The fall of Rome.
Of
course, you can find a lot of inspiration like Pompeii and Atlantis.
But in a political sense.
In the sense of the historical impact of this disappearance of an empire that ruled the world for 1,000 years at least.
And in the story, it's just like that.
In the story, it's just like that. And in history, it's also like just like that.
And this is the next event in our timeline, Aegon's landing and conquest,
Very similar to the Norman conquest, the William the Conqueror. Conqueror from outside that establishes a dynasty.
Unites the kingdom in a sense.
Creating this sense of unity.
Changes the history of this continent.
The history of this kingdom.
And then the next event is the fall of that dynasty, So that's the Robert's Rebellion and the death of the Mad King and the end of the Targaryen dynasty. That's a huge political event in the history of this continent. And what do you compare that to?
The War of the Roses.
The
War of the Roses. I think it's like established, you know.
That's like now it's mainstream. The War of the Roses has gone mainstream. If we look to that comparison between the Westerosi timeline and the British timeline, which correspond in many ways. And then if we look at what happened to Britain up to now, what is your bold prediction timeline-wise, which will happen to Westeros? Also, you think that as England became the #1 superpower, Westeros and its offshoots will become the #1 superpower?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Let's start with Elizabeth, which we think inspired the Sansa character. In her times, Britain became like this important European superpower. Then starting the period of the Anglo-Saxon or British expansion with the Jamestown colony, the Mayflower lands in New England. Australia in 1788 became a colony in Britain. The British established a foothold in India. In the 18th century, you have U.S. independence. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 that almost doubled or more than doubled the territory of the United States.
Why do you include the U.S. expansion in the British timeline?
Because I want to, and because I'm telling the story of the Anglo-Saxon expansion.
So it's like an offshoot, politically, culturally, economically.
It's part of the British expansion. And the expansion continued. They reached China and started the Opium Wars in 1839.
They do not rest, these British.
In 1860, with the scramble for Africa. This period of 30-40 years of eating piece by piece all of Africa's land. And Britain, in the start after the World War, they are controlling not only India, not only Africa, not only Australia and Canada, but also part of the Middle East.
So now is the time that the sun does not set on the British Empire?
Yeah, now is the time, but the sun started to set at the end of World War II. The British Empire broke down, basically, and started the post-colonial period. But even though the empire itself broke down and fell, the offshoots of this empire, like the United States, started the American century. And the lingua franca of today's time is English.
It used to be French, and then it became English.
It used to be French up until the 20th century. Now it's English.
Okay, so we end this timeline basically with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 and the beginning of a new era, an era of a sole superpower, the descendant of the British Empire that is now basically ruling the world. Basically, this timeline could change. Let's say if in a few years there's another economic crash, maybe we will have to add to this timeline the 2008 economic crash. So timelines basically are always changing. Always evolving.
Always changing. Especially the timelines in pre-modern time, before history became a scientific discipline, let's say. Pre-modern timelines are useless. Pre-modern numbers are useless. If like a ancient historian says 100,000 soldiers against 100,000 soldiers, he usually exaggerates. And if someone in the story says the long night happened 8,000 years ago, it could have happened 3,000 years ago maybe, or 20,000 years ago. And also, when Sam researched about the others in the libraries of the Citadel, the Black Castle Black, he found out that the earliest mention of a Lord Commander is 600 and something, 660 something.
And now we are in 998.
And John is like 998. And he says all the information that came before that 600, that number, is like kings who ruled for thousands of years and knights that traveled for thousands of years. So you cannot rely on that. So my prediction.
About the past, not about the future.
So timelines after the conquest, after Aegon's landing, are reliable. Because they started the count. But almost everything that came before, because the first men haven't written anything and the Andals haven't written a lot, is unreliable. So if we say 8,000 years, it could be 3,000 years.
So basically you're saying the lore is fake and we don't know anything.
Not fake. The period between the long night and the age that we are now in the story is much more shorter. Much more shorter. And it was only preserved as something much more ancient. And maybe a modern Westerosi historian
Right.
will write the history of the Westerosi people, he will look back at the War of the Five Kings and
Right.
he will push it aside.
Right.
It was maybe important in the sense of the internal politics, but in the sense of the taking over of Westeros on the world, it's not that important. Who remember the War of the Roses besides the English people?
Yeah, historians maybe, and fans of A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. Yeah, so all the characters that we love and all the events that are so important, maybe in the grand scheme of things, will not be that important. So that's a very bold prediction, Itamar. Good for you. So if you enjoyed this video, click like. Of course, check out Civilization X's channel. He has very, very cool art. Thanks, guy. Thanks, guy. So check out Civilization X's channel. He has a very cool channel, very cool art. And if you enjoyed the video, click like. And if you want to support us on Patreon, that would be really, really cool. There's a link in the description. If you have a different timeline to propose, either for Westeros or for British, or if you want to chime in about the timeline of your own country, because
Then
we have...
call Civilization X, he will draw for you.
Okay. Or you can comment, whichever way you prefer, and subscribe to get our next video, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.